On this edition of the Newsmakers, the UK government has approved the construction of the most expensive nuclear power station ever. Did it get a good deal, or is the Hinkley Point project fundamentally flawed? Also on today's program, Russia is being accused of meddling in the US elections. Are we seeing a return to Cold War tactics? And in Picture This, Game of Thrones breaks the television record at this year's Emmy Awards. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. According to Greenpeace, it will be the most expensive object on Earth. A $24 billion nuclear power station in Western England that's finally been given the green light by the British government. The cost is only one part of the controversy. There are, of course, the environmental concerns that accompany all nuclear projects. And there are also concerns over outsourcing the construction of critical infrastructure to foreign companies. The project is partly financed by a state-backed Chinese company and will be built by the French energy giant EDF. Our newsmaker today is the Hinkley Point power station. Is it a bold decision that will secure the UK's energy supply, or could it be the most expensive white elephant ever?
The UK's first new nuclear power station in a generation. A $24 billion project, the Hinkley Point plant will meet 7% of Britain's electricity needs for 60 years and create more than 25,000 jobs.
The electricity generated will be reliable and low carbon, and so completely compatible with our climate change obligations. And Hinkley Point C will inaugurate a new era of UK nuclear power.
But this new era will be funded by foreign investment. Two-thirds of the project is being paid for by French state-controlled energy firm EDF. And it's been guaranteed around double the market rate to generate electricity for 35 years, meaning British consumers could pay subsidies of up to $39 billion. The other third of the plant is being funded by China, with the understanding it could lead future nuclear build projects in the UK. The deal has raised concerns about national security, prompting the government to enforce new safeguards. It says it will be able to stop EDF from selling its controlling stake in Hinkley and will take a special share in all future nuclear projects. But some critics say even with these safeguards, this deal is costly for the UK and the environment. Nuclear power supplies around 20% of Britain's energy. Hinkley Point will be the first reactor built there since the 1990s. In 2015, more than a quarter of the EU's energy came from nuclear power, with 128 reactors operating in 14 out of the 28 member countries. The UK has an ambitious target. By 2030, it aims to reduce its carbon emissions by 57% on 1990 levels, tougher than the EU's target of 40%. While nuclear power will help towards this target, it raises concerns about other environmental risks. The UK also has a goal to meet 15% of its energy needs from renewable sources by 2020. Critics of the Hinkley Point deal say it is a short-sighted investment. The UK's own public watchdog says that by 2025, the cost of producing electricity by renewables, such as wind and solar energy, will be the same or lower than nuclear. Is Hinkley Point a good deal for the UK? Or does having foreign companies in charge of this project make it vulnerable? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from London is Tom Burke, chairman of the environmental think tank E3G and a former government advisor on climate change, and Michal Meidan, Asia analyst for the research consultancy Energy Aspects. Thanks so much, both of you, for joining us. Tom Burke, Hinkley Point, what's your biggest problem with it?
Oh, it's a very expensive strategic mistake for the country. As your package pointed out, it's going to produce electricity at more than twice the current wholesale price for 35 years. It's going to cost £37 billion in subsidy from British consumers to get it, and all of that for an untried reactor no example of which is working anywhere in the world. So it's a very bad deal. There are cheaper, faster, cleaner, more reliable ways to meet a low-carbon, affordable, secure electricity supply for the future. So what you're really seeing is a 20th century solution to 21st century problems.
Just to be clear, Tom, you're emphasizing cost over security. How big are your security concerns?
I'm not very worried about the prospect of taking Chinese money, and the way you fit nuclear power stations into your grid doesn't give them access to the kind of software that would expose you to security worries about crashing your grid. I think the government is right to have taken a golden share in order to prevent the reactors being sold on. But the security worries aren't really the biggest worries. There are, of course, other anxieties about what happens to the radioactive waste at the end of its life. There is no yet available solution to that problem in the United Kingdom, or indeed really anywhere else in the world.
Okay, Michal Meidan, this is a very expensive strategic mistake, according to Tom. You disagree. Why?
I mean, if you look at on the diplomatic level, it might have been a strategic mistake when it was first conceived by Osborne and Cameron. For Theresa May now to have cancelled it vis-à-vis the Chinese would have been a huge diplomatic gaffe. Now, in terms of energy considerations, I think there are still we still need to see how the pricing pans out. We do still need to see how the technologies on the renewable side pan out. Overall, yes, it looks like the consumers are overpaying right now. We don't know that for sure in 10 years. But on the diplomatic level, it's a completely different story, because cancelling the deal at this point in time when the UK needs all its foreign partners and potential markets, cancelling such a big profile deal with the Chinese would have been seen as a slap in the face and would have taken UK-China relations 10 steps backwards.
Yeah, that's interesting, Michal, because Prime Minister Theresa May was having second thoughts. Then she said, OK. There's speculation about what happened in that interim. Do you think that the Chinese had threatened her or threatened the British government to say, hey, we're going to go back those 10 years and you're not going to get a sweet deal on anything else?
Well, the Chinese made it very clear that they would be very disappointed if the deal were not to go through. I don't think there's much that they can threaten with. I mean, it's the UK opening its borders or not. But for the UK, again, it was a very big symbol. And we have to remember that just ahead of the G20, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sent a very concerned letter and issued a very concerned paper about the future of Japanese investments in the UK. So certainly a part of it was to show that the UK is open for business, but with some safeguards. And probably there were domestic political calculuses involved here, with Theresa May wanting to differentiate herself from Cameron and Osborne. So I think there are a lot of factors that came into this decision.
Tom, Burke, the price you have to pay, $24 billion to have warmer relations with the Chinese?
Well, I certainly agree that that was a major, looks like having been a major factor in the decision. In a sense, it was a white elephant that got so big nobody could shoot it. That doesn't make it anything like a good deal. It's just you're basically selling out your energy policy for some marginal gains in the headlines. And the really strategic problem is it begins to point Britain in the wrong direction in terms of the future architecture of its electricity system. We're moving into a world in which the digitization makes available all kinds of strategic and structural change in industry. That's true for the electricity industry as well. And what it means for Britain's electricity consumers is all they'll go on getting for the next 35 years through their letterbox will be a big bill. Actually, the world in which we're moving into for electricity systems is one in which consumers won't only be getting bills through their letterboxes, they'll be getting checks, revenue checks as well.
Michal, might it be better to invest the money in renewables, as some have suggested? Because who knows, by 2025, these stations might almost be a relic of a bygone era.
I mean, certainly there are alternatives, including renewables, including natural gas, including interconnecting with other European countries. A review of the UK's energy policy would be a good thing. I just think that the timing now, Theresa May inherited this white elephant, or this very big deal. It became a hot potato, and there were very few good options for her. But certainly a review of the UK's energy needs and its energy policy would be a good thing for the government.
Tom, post-Fukushima, there was a taboo related to or connected to nuclear energy. Might a deal like this begin the process of reversing that taboo, reversing those questions that people have been asking about whether nuclear energy is the way to go?
I don't think so, actually. I suspect Hinkley will be a one-off, rather like Sizewell was in a previous British governments when there were big nuclear ambitions. 10 power stations were promised, one was actually built. I think the economics are a real killer for nuclear. If you're worried about safety, what you want to be more concerned about is the Chinese government proposing to build 60 nuclear power stations in the next few years. And I think the idea that you can maintain the necessary level of safety and quality of build in order for those programs to be successful, I think that's a very, very big question mark.
Michal, Tom says Hinkley will be a one-off. We'll be finding out in 4 years if China's plans for an even bigger station in Essex, the Bradwell nuclear plant, will be approved. Do you think it will be approved, Michal?
I think that will face quite a few delays. We'll see if Hinkley Point starts on time. As Tom said, there are issues with the technology. We haven't really seen it yet. Even financing for EDF could be a problem, and the government has hinted that future deals will not look like this one. So any future reactors, I think, will be a long time in the making.
Tom, 25,000 jobs will be created between now and 2025. Aren't you at least a little bit excited about that?
I'm not at all excited about it. I'm much more concerned about the 14,000 jobs in energy efficiency that the British government destroyed by an arbitrary change in its policy, and the 12,000 jobs in the solar industry that it destroyed by an arbitrary policy. We could have got more than that number of British jobs that would be long life jobs if we continued with those policies, and we simply wouldn't have needed Hinkley at all for our secure supplies of affordable electricity. The thing to remember is that the costs of the renewables, the costs of batteries that allow you to deal with their variability, those costs are going down consistently. Nobody's ever built a new program of nuclear power stations where the cost didn't go up over time.
Okay, good point. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Tom Burke and Michal Meidan, it's been great to talk to both of you. Thank you so much. Still to come on the Newsmakers, are Russian hackers targeting the US presidential election? And if so, why? And in Picture This, it was a night for the favorites, but with a few surprises also thrown in. We round up the 2016 Emmy Awards. Is Russia meddling in the US presidential election? And if so, what's it trying to achieve? A string of recent data leaks have been blamed on Russian hackers, including a large cache of emails from the Democratic National Committee. At the same time, we have one of the nominees, Republican Donald Trump, offering unprecedented praise for Russia and its president, Vladimir Putin. In a moment, we'll be discussing what to make of all of this with a former US ambassador. But first, this report by Randolph Nogel.
I'm really concerned about Russian government interference in our elections.
Perhaps not since the Cold War has a U.S. presidential election campaign been so fixated on Russia.
He's also a guy who annexed Crimea, invaded Ukraine, supports Assad in Syria, supports Iran, and according to our intelligence community, probably is the main suspect for the hacking of the DNC computers.
Well, nobody knows that for a fact.
Along with the well-established geopolitical differences between the U.S. and Russia, cyber war and cyber politics now feature prominently in the rhetorical battle being waged on the campaign trail.
We've never had a nominee of one of our major parties urging the Russians to hack more.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
A series of data breaches throughout the 2016 presidential race have stirred controversy and have raised eyebrows along with questions over the line between transparency and treachery.
Разве это важно? Кто взломал? Там вот эти какие-то там данные из штаба, предвыборного штаба госпожи Клинтон. Разве это важно?
A hard battle fought and won, but the victory lap cut short. Documents released by WikiLeaks suggested DNC insiders were coordinating political strategy with Hillary Clinton's campaign, to the dismay of her rival for the Democratic presidential nomination, Bernie Sanders, and his millions of supporters. WikiLeaks is the same group that dumped a trove of emails from Hillary Clinton's private email server in March. WikiLeaks and its founder, Julian Assange, say they're dedicated to radical transparency. But some critics say the organization has functioned as a de facto Donald Trump super PAC. WikiLeaks has not, for instance, published any information regarding Donald Trump's tax returns,
We'll bring our jobs back.
which he has so far refused to make public. While who exactly is doing the hacking is unclear, some analysts point to a state actor.
I would expect that one or two random hackers could penetrate someone like that, but they wouldn't be able to throw 30 people at the task of going through 10,000 files the way an intelligence agency could.
And with Donald Trump appearing so cozy with Vladimir Putin, a murky theory has emerged. Is Russia working with WikiLeaks to meddle in this presidential election? Russian hackers are also suspected of targeting reporters at the New York Times and other U.S. news organizations. And perhaps most troubling are breaches into Arizona and Illinois state voter registration systems in June and July. Even without concrete conviction as to who exactly is behind the keyboard, there's rising concern that foreign actors could effectively manipulate the race for the American presidency. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by William Courtney, the former U.S. ambassador to Kazakhstan and Georgia, and now a senior fellow at the RAND Corporation. Thanks so much for joining us, Ambassador Courtney. Do you believe, sir, that there is sufficient proof that Russia is interfering in this 2016 U.S. presidential election?
Yes, statements by officials and by respected private companies that monitor hacking have all indicated the Russians are involved. Just this morning, Secretary of State John Kerry released an interview in which he said that both President Obama and he have raised this concern with Russian leaders.
Okay, so let me put it to you this way then. If they are interfering just to disrupt the election or to hand it to Donald Trump?
Probably at the beginning, the focus was more on disrupting the election. The Russians have just conducted yesterday a parliamentary election, which has a lot of shortcomings, even though administratively it was conducted better than some in the past. But the Russian authorities want to show that the U.S. election system is chaotic and perhaps even rigged. So this hacking was part of an effort to do that. What has changed in the last week is that Donald Trump has moved up in the polls now closer to Hillary Clinton, and they're running even in some areas. So this may raise a question whether the Kremlin will perceive a new opportunity now to extend its interference, possibly to tip the balance for Donald Trump.
If it was the Russians behind the DNC hack, Colin Powell's colorful email hack, how much damage do you really think has been done to the prestige of the United States and, I guess, to the personalities of those involved?
Not so much to the prestige of the United States, but the main issue is for the Russians is, are they achieving a result that they wanted to achieve? For example, there's so much suspicion in the United States about Russian motives, and this goes from everything to the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of eastern Ukraine, to its activities in Syria, to its internal crackdown at home, that the evidence of Russian interference in the hacking, if you will, has probably caused some benefit to Mrs. Clinton because a lot of people are suspicious of Russia, but perhaps also to Donald Trump. So it's not clear at this point who has benefited on that.
Some go a step further, they go a bit deeper, and they suggest that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks serve Russian interests and might be involved in this. Does that sound like a conspiracy theory to you, or does it sound as if it has validity?
Well, it certainly is the case that WikiLeaks has released information that the Russians have wanted to have released. The hacking of the emails by Russian authorities and then their release through WikiLeaks suggests that WikiLeaks has been, if you will, a witting accomplice to this activity.
Shyla Nelson, who's a co-founder of the civil rights group Election Justice USA, has been quoted recently as saying, the narrative that somehow foreign operatives would be hacking in order to interfere with our national elections is not only unsubstantiated, it's reckless and incendiary. Can you see where Shyla Nelson is coming from in the absence of smoking gun proof?
There's been enough smoking gun proof. If the President of the United States, the Secretary of State are warning the Russian leaders about this, if respected private companies that monitor hacking are reporting that the Russians are involved, and these organizations have reported that two specific Russian organizations, Russian military intelligence, the GRU, and Russia's civilian intelligence, the FSB, are involved. So there's pretty much quite a bit of evidence in the case.
How would you say this affects the efforts of the United States in Russia's neck of the woods, in the countries, for example, that you served as ambassador to? How would it affect the dynamics vis-a-vis Georgia and other countries?
Those countries have more direct threats from Russia. The Russians occupy two separatist regions of Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia, and of course the Russians have invaded Ukraine. So from those country standpoints, those are much more serious threats than what they see in terms of Russian hacking of U.S. elections.
If the president called you into the room and you were at the table and he asked you, Ambassador Courtney, how should I respond to the Russians threatening and interfering in our elections, how would you advise him? What would you advise him to do?
Well, the most effective response is to strengthen the defenses of organizations, because it's not only the Russians who would potentially have the capability to hack U.S. election systems. The U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Jay Johnson, has proposed that U.S. election systems be brought into a program to protect U.S. critical infrastructure. That won't be accomplished by the elections in November, but as a long-term effort, it could help protect those organizations. Also, states and localities in the United States conduct elections, not the national government. So they have been forewarned and are taking really extra measures now to improve their cybersecurity. In addition, the United States may propose some actions response to Russian hacking that could involve sanctions or other things. I don't think economic sanctions are appropriate now. There are quite a few economic sanctions on Russia because of its aggression in Ukraine, but there may be some more specific measures that could make sense.
Would you advise him to fight hacking with hacking?
That really depends on the context. It'd be hard to make a recommendation about that without knowing more.
Okay. Ambassador William H. Courtney, good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. In today's Picture This, we're looking at one of the biggest nights for television, the annual Emmy Awards. And it's been a record-breaking year for one of the world's most popular series. Let's find out why. Our newsmaker today was the Hinkley Point nuclear power plant in the UK, which has finally been given the go-ahead after years of delays. Its $24 billion price tag will make it the most expensive nuclear power station ever built. And some say it'll be the costliest object on Earth. So is it worth it? Well, we heard from Tom Burke, a former government environmental advisor, who told us that the project is an expensive strategic mistake and represents a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem. But energy analyst Michal Meidan told us that cancelling the deal would have had a devastating effect on British relations with China. And on balance, Prime Minister Theresa May was right to approve the deal. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thank you for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.